Hi, everyone. That was the last time you'll be hearing Danzón number 2 by Arturo Marquez. Thanks again to Andrew Bales from the Silicon Valley Symphony, who sent us that piece. As I've mentioned, that dance originated in Cuba. It was a fusion of European and African influences, which has evolved into this kind of slower rhythm, which is very popular in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, especially in the state of Veracruz. Thanks again, Andrew, for sending us that recording, and I hope our members enjoyed hearing and learning about that particular musical genre. As a reminder, speakers today, please stay within your time limits so you won't negatively impact those speakers who are scheduled to speak after you. Because if you don't stay within those limits, it throws us all off. We appreciate it and apologize in advance. Welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests, meeting number 5273. We'll have the birthdays for today, but before that, I'm sad to report our dear Rotarian who used to welcome us when we got our badges for our Wednesday meetings and provided chocolates and candies after the meetings. George Tilson passed away last Tuesday, October 20th, after battling cancer. Her eulogy will be at a later date, but I thought you should know about this regrettable loss to our club. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. Our birthday boy today is James Williams. He was raised on a tobacco farm in Tennessee. He got an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University and worked in high-tech finance for 30 years. But now he's the managing director and the Chief Financial Officer for Opera San Jose, and he says that's his dream job. So happy birthday, James. Now we have Julie Shaver. She was sponsored by Rose Simmons. Julie was born in San Francisco, raised in Saratoga, lives in Almaden, got her master's in public health from San Diego State, a proud Aztec. And she's been with the American Cancer Society for 23 years, where she's the executive director. She'll give us today's inspirational thought. Julie Shaver, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Thank you, President Fernando, and thanks everyone for having me today. I appreciate it. When Terry Austin first asked me to tell an inspirational story or thought, I was first thinking of, the work that I do with the American Cancer Society. Being here for 23 years, I have the pleasure every single day of working with volunteers who are so passionate about the mission of the organization, and that truly is inspiring, much like the passion for the community that exists within our own San Jose Rotary. But what I wanted to share today is one of the topics of discussion that's been recently in my home. With our crazy 2020, there has been an abundance of topics for discussion with my two children. I have a freshman in high school who has yet to step foot on her high school campus, and a senior who is hoping to be able to play his spring sport that he has been training for since he was 10 years old. We've discussed a lot of topics this year, issues like public health, social injustice, social media, politics, abundance of topics. But our most recent conversation has been around freedom of speech, a constitutional right in this country. And for myself and for my kids, who were all born and raised here in the United States, we don't know life without that right. So I shared the story of my cousin that I want to share with all of you today. My cousin was born and raised in Tehran. In the 1980s, she grew up when Khomeini was in power. There were many rules they had to follow, very different than what we follow here today. And they lived in fear every day. She remembers going to school and having the military show up randomly at her class, and they would search their backpacks, not for drugs or weapons, but for magazines or newspapers that had anything negative written about the government. In fact, one day that they came and searched the backpacks, a few of her friends did have newspapers. and she watched her friends be taken away by the military, and they were sentenced to prison. We know that freedom of speech is a right, but unfortunately, this year we've seen it used to do some harm. So I've told my kids that I actually see freedom of speech as a gift. It's a gift that comes with great responsibility and must be respectfully exercised to preserve its beauty. The opportunity for healthy debate, the ability to question things, the ability to agree to disagree while you are still acting with the utmost respect for your community members. My cousin's experience really makes me reflect and inspires me to be grateful for the rights that we have in our country and how lucky we are. And also, it's a good reminder to exercise the responsibility that goes with these gifts. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share with all of you. And thank you all for the difference and the impact that you're making in the community. Every single one of our members of our San Jose Rotary, everything that you do in the community is in and of itself inspiring. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Julie. You remind us of a truly important gift that our founding fathers gave us, and that is this freedom of speech, which, as you pointed out, isn't all that free in many parts of the world. And of course, we have encountered challenges to that freedom, and we hope that we all awaken to those rights and those responsibilities that we have as citizens to vote and to be mindful of the gifts that we have been given in this country. Now, thank you, Julie. We have new members to introduce. Believe it? 2 new members. First, we have Debbie Caminiti. Her sponsor is Rod Diridon Sr. And in 3 minutes, Debbie, please tell us everything about you.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's so nice to see all your faces. I'm Debbie, and I'm born and raised in San Jose. I have 5 children, Richie, Michael, Benny, Dominic, and Gina, and 3 dogs, Bella, Rosie, and Lucy. I'm a project manager at Adobe. And I've always wanted to be involved with community and volunteerism. I don't know if you guys remember the old Charlie and Humphrey show, and once a year you could get a package to do a carnival in your backyard. And so I started way back when I was probably 10 years old doing that. And my most recent volunteer opportunity was I'm the co-founder of Little Italy San Jose. And I also owned Bel Baccio Cafe in Little Italy for 4 years. So I was with them, Little Italy San Jose, for over 10 years working on that project. What else about me? I love to travel. My current job with Adobe has given me the ability to travel the world, and I've been very thankful for that. And outdoor activities, which I need to do a lot more of during COVID. I like to camp and hike and bike. So that's a little bit about me, and I want to thank Rod Diridon for staying on me to get involved with this group. It's a great group, and I really look forward to diving into community opportunities and making a difference with all of you. Thank you for having me.
Well, great. We hope that you can help us choose some more products out of Adobe, right?
Yes,
What we can
exactly.
do. Sure. All right. Thank you, Debbie. Next, we've got Sheila McIntyre, and her sponsor was Brenda Sweeney. Brenda Sweeney brought you in, and we, in 3 minutes, want to hear all about you, Sheila. So take it away. Are you unmuted there, Sheila?
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow Rotarians. My name is Sheila McIntyre, and I'm honored to be a new member of San Jose Rotary. And I do want to start by thanking my sponsor, Brenda Sweeney. She's always invited me to various Rotary meetings and encouraged me to join one of the most respected organizations in San Jose. So thank you, Brenda. So who am I? I am a native Californian. I was born in Oakland at the Naval Hospital. I was raised in San Jose, and I graduated from Pioneer High School in the Cambrian area of San Jose. and I completed my Bachelor of Arts at San Diego State University. A couple of things people don't know about me. I used to teach children's dance, and then I danced professionally with Dick Foster Presents out of Las Vegas. I come from a family of 10, and my father, Richard J. Daniels, was a real estate attorney and broker. So leadership in the real estate industry was a natural progression for me as I segued my career into becoming a real estate professional. I have a good reputation of ethical and fair dealing within the real estate community, and being really familiar with our neighborhoods. I absolutely love finding those off-market opportunities for my clients, as well as pinpointing the best return for their individual lifestyles. I've been helping buyers and sellers for 20 years, and I'm currently with Coldwell Banker in Saratoga. And this way my office is positioned where I can serve clients in the South Bay and also up the peninsula, although I live in San Jose near the Rose Garden. I am a devoted daughter to my mother, who's 90 years old, and I'm a devoted mother to my daughter, who just graduated from Cal Berkeley. So now I find I have time and extra energy to put back into our community, and I'm very passionate about our environment, housing our community members, and cleaning and beautifying San Jose's neighborhoods, freeways, and interchanges. And for several years, my mother and I would clean the interchange near South Bascom and Interstate 880 or Highway 880. And I'd like to continue pursuing how we can shape San Jose into being the beautiful city it is meant to be. A humanitarian at heart, I look forward to serving our community and building new business relations amongst fellow Rotarians, to continue cultivating the rich history and programs established by the Rotary, and discover new ways to help our businesses flourish. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you in person, hopefully sooner than later. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. You heard our inspirational thought was given earlier from another fellow Aztec, and I hope you guys connect. Debbie, Sheila, before COVID, we would have given each of you a rousing standing ovation. Unfortunately, now all we can say is welcome. Once this virus is over, we'll get to know each other better. But up until then, we'll please tune in on these Zoom-in broadcasts. Next, we've got Karen Fox. Karen Fox was born in San Jose. She went to Leland High School. She got a finance degree out of Santa Clara University and an MBA out of USC. And she has a PhD in organizational psychology. She's a consultant in statistical research for high-tech companies, and her sponsor is Audrey Fox, no relation. Karen is on the membership committee and will tell us about its mentoring program for Red Badge members. Karen Fox, you ready to go?
Yes.
Hit it.
Okay. Thanks, President Fernando, for this opportunity to provide an update on our Red Badge mentoring program. This program that I oversee is a strategic initiative of the membership committee. The primary objective is to increase the retention of our Rotary Club members. So how do we achieve this? By ensuring that our newest members feel welcome, engaged, and informed about our club's culture. After all, early engagement is vital to becoming a contributing and a longtime participant of the club. How does the program work? As you know, new members participate in the Red Badge Committee, chaired by Terry Chapman and Helen Lambert. The Red Badgers who want a mentor would express that to Terry or Helen, who would then let me know, and then I would match the Red Badger to an active and experienced Rotarian. The mentors would be the ones to initiate the contact with their mentees, and then together they would informally determine the frequency and modality of their one-on-one meetings. Depending on the needs of the mentees, mentors might assist them with things such as finding appropriate committees to audit and join, introducing them to other Rotarians who share common interests, checking in on occasion, and really important is understanding the implicit norms and protocols and expectations of how San Jose Rotary conducts its committees and meetings. I commend the Red Badgers who have joined in the last several months. What a fantastic job you've done in acclimating to our virtual environment. And I really want to owe a big thank you to our mentors. They've really stepped up. While mentees have expressed their appreciation, mentors have conveyed the benefits of meeting new and exciting people. So my call to action for everyone, if you have the passion and bandwidth, please consider becoming a mentor. No set guidelines are necessary. You just need to be a friend. You can contact me and my information is on the slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. In Yiddish, you can be a mensch as well as a mentor.
Oh, so good.
Thank you, Karen. And you know, the word mentor is used now as a noun. It was actually the name of the teacher to Alcibiades. Back in the Greek times, he was the son of a Greek general. And so mentor is the one that taught the general's son. And so that name, his name, has become synonymous with this now teaching others or helping others in their quest for fitting in. So thanks very much, Karen. Listen, I'm now going to step in the shoes of Gay Crawford, in the high stilettos of Gay Crawford. It's the end of the month and it's time for some fine opportunities. So first we have Carl Silker. Carl was born in San Jose. He grew up in Saratoga and Los Gatos. He got a bachelor's degree in agricultural business from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. He used to manage the family orchards and properties, but he decided to retire. He joined Rotary the same year the late Bill Del Biagio and I joined in 1983. He was past president of this club in 2002 and 2003, and he helps us on Team Z to organize these agendas. Carl chairs the club's photography committee and has some good news on the home front. So tell us what you've got and how many rings, Carl?
Well, thank you, President Fernando. I appreciate the time here today. I was going to say, a year and a half ago, my son and his husband met Mario, a 7-year-old boy who needed a new place to grow up. Noel and Alan agreed to be Mario's foster parents, and they took him into their home. Since then, they've worked on being a family. The three got to know each other, their habits, likes and dislikes, smiles, tears, tempers, and laughter. They've worked at it. It's not all been easy, but it's been good. Our greater family has met Mario, and they've welcomed and supported him, and he's joined in too. He loves the snow in the winter, the pool in the summer, bikes and skateboards, and he thinks Spider-Man is the best thing ever. He plays with our grandchildren and cousins of all ages, and now he joins them. Important evaluations, meetings, and hearings were held. A few weeks ago, in the courtroom in the picture, he became legally what he's become to us personally. He's now our third grandson. Our family continues to grow in ways that Kathy and I never expected, and that's a good thing. And that's worth a lot to have Mario as a part of it. And for today, that's worth 5 rings of Fernando's bell.
Well, wow, 5 rings. Here we go. Okay. Thank you, Carl. That's very generous of you, and congratulations to you and to your entire family for showing what Rotary can do in the home front, where you're sharing your home, you're sharing your love with someone, a young child who couldn't have found a better home and a better family to be brought into. Congratulations to you. Listen, we've got a little bit of time today. If any of you out there are interested in sharing your good news, just let us know in the chat room, or speak up or raise your hand or do something. Let me know, and I'll be happy to let you ring in if you can. Other than that, if there's anyone out there, let's see. I don't see anything coming across here yet, but well, let's move on. Don't forget, this effort of ours is an effort to put a positive spin on this idea of raising money, rather than the negative one of fining you. It's, I think, one of creating an opportunity to share good news, because I know that in these very, very turbulent times, there's still good news, just like what Carl just shared with us. And if you have good news, let Gay Crawford know in time for the next month. And I'm not sure how we're going to do this because it's Thanksgiving next month, and whether or not we'll have one, we'll talk with our Team Z folks to go ahead and decide whether to have a good news meeting next November. But nevertheless, call or let Gay Crawford know, and we'll certainly take it from there. Okay. Let's see. We've got some announcement from Sarah Janigan and Mauricio Cordova giving us an update on the Fiesta de Gala Rotaria, as I like to call it, Fiesta de Gala Rotaria. So Mauricio and Sarah, are you guys on?
We're here, Fernando. Thank you for the entry, and well, you already kind of shared half of the fun part, which was the theme. But yeah, Mauricio Cordova, I have the pleasure to co-chair this year with Sarah. We're very excited to share with you the date of our event, which is going to be Cinco de Mayo. It will be a Wednesday, so more likely something out of a drive-through slash maybe a hybrid. So we're kind of working on those details, but we're very excited that we have a date and it'll be a fun part. And like Fernando said, it is a fiesta theme as we are continue to celebrate diversity and inclusion this year. And Sarah will share a little bit more about what we got going on and what we're looking for. Sarah, it's all yours. You there, Sarah?
Have you unmuted yourself?
I just wanted to let everybody know that we welcome new members to the Rotary Gala Committee. We're going to be starting, our first meeting is November 4th via Zoom. We would love to have anybody who'd like to join us. The gala will include all of the kind of traditional themes and activities of the Rotary Gala, only just adjusted a little bit to our COVID times and restrictions that we'll have on us by May, which we hope will be very limited. So we look forward to welcoming new members. You can contact Mauricio or myself and we will give you information. But our first meeting will be November 4th, 4 o'clock via Zoom. So please contact us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, also, not only are we continue with the traditional themes, but we've added this idea of maybe giving it a little Latino twist to it, as can be telegraphed by the title that we have put on it, the Fiesta de Gala Rotaria. I think everyone knows what each of those words mean, so I won't have to translate it, but we're going to put some Latino themes to this thing and see if we can make it a fun event. And I hope that we can do it on May 5th, which of course is the day that a lot of the Mexican community celebrates here when they defeated the Mexicans defeated the French when they invaded Mexico back in the 1800s. So next we've got a slide, a message from the club's foundation's fundraising campaign to show us what our participation rate is for contributing to our foundation. As you know, we depend on the amount of money our members contribute to our foundation in order to help fund the many, many activities that our committees undertake. We've got over 50 committees, and they all look to the foundation for some financial support to help them carry out their functions, their activities that they do every year. So from time to time, we'll report back to you to bring you some updates and perhaps see if you're close to a new level of giving. Also, here's something that I think is important to convey to you. Remember that the governance guidelines, which were adopted by both boards, and they are adopted each year, require that committees are not allowed to make fundraising appeals or requests to the club without prior approval of both boards. I know we've got fires and floods and earthquakes and all these things, but you have to go through the normal channels in order to do this. You can't just out of the blue ask for money. You need to get permission from both club boards before you make that request. Here's the wording of that It says any ad hoc fundraising effort, such as disaster relief campaigns, conducted by the Rotary Club of San Jose that involves soliciting contributions from all San Jose Rotarians must be approved by both Club Board of Directors and then the Foundation Board of Trustees prior to the initial solicitation. So it's not that we're being hard-nosed, it's just that we need to be organized and we need to have some procedures in place to handle the many, many requests we often get throughout the year for funds and for money because these emergencies arise without any prior arrangements. Next, we've got Gay Crawford. Gay Crawford, as you know, is the founder of Cancer Care Point, and she's a member of our program committee, and she's going to introduce our speaker. So, Gay Crawford, you ready?
I am ready. And I'm so excited to welcome back public broadcasting investigative writer and producer Rick Young. He was a John S. Knight journalism fellow at Stanford in 2008, and we got to meet him. He came and spoke to us, and today he's joining us from Washington, D.C. And before his journalism career, he spent 6 years as an investigator for the U.S. House of Representatives, which I imagine a few of us would love to hear a little more about too. And since the early 90s, Rick has been an investigative producer working with the public broadcasting documentary series Frontline, producing more than 20 documentaries on all sorts of subjects, environment, politics, and business. In 2009, he launched a partnership between Frontline and the Investigative Reporting Workshop at American University, and they produced a dozen Frontline documentaries, some of which we are going to hear about today, Plastic Wars. The venture's first production, Flying Cheap, won a Writers Guild Award for its investigation of the regional airline industry. I bet a lot of us saw it. For 5 years, Rick collaborated on a series of Frontline documentaries examining America's changing economic landscape, including Can You Afford to Retire? Is Walmart Good for America? Tax Me If You Can, and The Wall Street Fix. He's a producer and correspondent of Gun Runners, a documentary about the illegal small arms trade in West Africa that premiered the PBS series Frontline World. He has won numerous awards, including 2 Emmys, Writers Guild nominations, and the Sigma Delta Chi Award. I am so happy to welcome Rick back. He has some video clips, and we hope that will go seamlessly. So, Rick, thank you so much for being with us again. It was fun to reach out to you over the years.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Gay, and thank you for staying in touch. I really appreciate that. And thanks to everyone for joining in and letting me tell you a little bit about our last investigation and our last Frontline film, Plastic Wars. We got started on this back actually in the spring of 2018. And it was at that time that earlier in 2018 that there had been some news about problems with recycling, plastic recycling in particular, because China had actually instituted a ban on taking plastic waste. And China was actually taking 65% of the world's plastic waste, and a tremendous amount from the United States and a lot from the West Coast, where you folks are, and upwards of 100% sometimes for some communities. And we were starting to dig around. We thought that was kind of interesting. We actually got sidetracked and went off and did another film at the time because our bosses wanted us to. But then we got back to this last year and started into reporting and production, and it aired earlier this year in March. And the thing about it that sort of struck us as we began to look at this recycling crisis that we were facing, we didn't want to really talk about, spend a lot of time on the plastic problem per se. We think that, the people are aware of this crisis of plastic waste. But what we found was an interesting dichotomy, where on the one hand, you've got this huge problem with plastic waste and this growing awareness of the problem. And on the other hand, the sort of lesser known reality is that the plastic industry is booming. The growth is unprecedented in some ways. And so we had this we're facing this kind of pivotal moment. And we thought that that would be a good sort of jumping off point as a place to begin to look and sort of set the table for, okay, how did we come to this moment? And John, maybe you can start the first clip because that's what this is about.
In 2015, a marine biologist came across a sea turtle in distress.
Yeah, I mean, it's bleeding already. Oh, poor baby. I'm sorry. Christ, that is plástico. Oh, man. Don't tell me it's a freaking stress. Just freaking...
Her video of the encounter quickly went viral.
This poor sea turtle.
It would attract more than 35 million views.
A rallying cry for action.
And focus public attention on a growing problem.
That turtle video certainly did have an impact.
Plastic pollution, a planetary crisis.
Plastics in the ocean have been building up for decades.
In an underwater paradise, a plastic nightmare.
Recurring images of dead whales.
80 plastic bags found inside the whale.
Bloated seabirds. And littered waterways have fueled a global anti-plastic movement.
Enemy number one, the plastic straw.
Many U.S. cities are taking steps to ban plastic grocery bags.
Save our Earth before it's too late!
And yet, despite the backlash, the industry that makes plastic is expanding.
The start of construction on that multi-billion-dollar plastics plant.
Plentiful supplies of natural gas are driving down the cost of making plastic. The U.S. is now one of the world's largest plastic producers.
It's going to be the largest plant of its kind in the world.
An industry is investing tens of billions of dollars in new plastic plants.
Construction will eventually employ 6,000 people.
By 2050, it's estimated that global production of plastic will triple.
A plastic boom. There's going to be more plastic than ever.
I wanted to understand how we came to this moment. How the plastic industry has been able to thrive all these years in the face of a growing crisis, an opposition that's now stronger than it's ever been.
Okay, that didn't run so smoothly, but I think you get the idea. I'm not sure what if that's a problem with, I guess internally there with getting the video to run, keep up. But I think you get the idea behind it. So essentially that's the open, and we use that open as the animating question for our reporting and our journey really to try and take a look at this question, like how did we get to this point? One of the first things we did and wanted to understand better was the recycling business itself. And so we went to Oregon. I mean, Oregon, recycling is religion. And they were the first state that actually had, 1971, they had the first bottle bill in the state. And so we decided to start talking to recyclers in Oregon. And it's important to recognize that sure, the recyclers are doing this because they have interest in protecting, helping with the environment and all of that, but they're a business, and at the end of the day, they have to run a business, and that business depends on the marketplace, and so that market, can they sell the plastic they get? So when you go out and put your plastic into a bin, right? We all do that. We dump it into a bin and it gets picked up and taken off and it goes to one of these recyclers. It's essentially a sorting facility where they pick out the paper and the metal and the plastics, and then they have to sort of try and figure out, which plastics can they sell. And some of them they can. For the most part, it's what they say, bottles and jugs, soda bottles and milk jugs. And the rest of it gets baled up. and those are called mixed plastics. And so most of the mixed plastics, as I mentioned, have been sold to China. But they're facing this reality. If they can't do something with it, where are they going to put it and where are they going to sell it? And if they can't sell it, what are they going to do with it? And in many cases, in most cases, most of that plastic goes to landfills. And that's just the reality that they're operating in. And that reality, once China closed its doors, that was what created the crisis. So let's try this second clip and see if it works.
Most mixed plastics end up in a place like this.
What you're seeing happening right now is that's a full size, that's probably a 53-foot trailer.
In Medford, Oregon, Rogue Disposal's landfill takes about 100 loads of trash a day, and more of it is plastic.
The plastic films, plastic bags, the plastic wrapping that comes around a lot of packaged goods, that all goes into the garbage. It's margarine tubs, clamshells, deli containers. Until there is a viable option for recycling those things, we should be putting it in a landfill.
But that's not what we've been told for decades, as the things we buy have been increasingly packaged in plastic.
Are you David? I'm Laura Sullivan.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
Very nice to meet you. Welcome to Portland.
David Alloway is a senior policy analyst with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
So much of all this stuff in the grocery store is plastic now.
It's really inexpensive.
It's an easy way to package it.
It is, and it performs very well. It has really good engineering qualities. It protects food very well.
This is my basic question, because it seems like everybody's buying lettuce in a box now. Is this recyclable?
In this state, none of this is recyclable.
Okay, what about all these? This is everywhere in every supermarket.
In Oregon, again, there are no curbside programs that would accept any of these tubs.
Okay, so this is classic when a lot of Americans do this. Look what you're doing right now.
Yep,
we
that's
flip
right.
it over.
Yep.
What are we looking at?
At the bottom of all these plastic containers is this little chasing arrow, the little recycling symbol with a number. And the number, there's some words. It says 1 PETE. This package here is technically recyclable. You could recycle this in a lab.
Okay.
But it's not economical to recycle it given the current economics of recycling.
But if it's not happening in Oregon, it makes me wonder what's going on in the rest of the country.
Yeah, I would say that this package is rarely recycled in most parts in the country.
Yeah.
Can I give you another example here?
Yes, please.
So let's take a look at these blueberries.
Okay.
This is classic. And if you turn this over, you see the chasing arrows. On the bottom, it says 100% recyclable. There is no program in Oregon that wants this in the curbside mix, but more than half of all people that live in the Portland area believe this belongs in the curbside container.
Well, it says it's recyclable.
It says it's recyclable. It has the recycling logo. It's very confusing to a lot of people.
This confusion about what can and can't be recycled and where plastic ultimately ends up is no accident. Over the past year, we've been investigating the plastic crisis and found that many of the problems we face today were set in motion decades ago by the very companies who make plastic in the first place.
Okay. So I wanted to show that part of the show because to me it sort of touches on what's familiar to us, going through the grocery store. And I don't know about other people. I've been an obsessive recycler. My kids would certainly attest to that, and they might call it obnoxious, right? Constantly saying, okay, look at it. Can it be recycled? Put it in the bin, make sure you do it. And, that clip in particular and sort of becoming, sort of touching in on what can and cannot be recycled, or raising that question of what we think about as recycling. That was sort of key here because, the question is, how do we come to believe so much of this is being recycled? And what did the industry, plastic industry, actually know about the feasibility of recycling. And that was sort of the heart of our investigation. And I'll leave it to you to sort of watch more, watch the show. But in essence, we ended up going to archives and digging out a lot of documents from as far back as the 70s, finding very interesting documents about the industry's concerns and sort of very honest assessment of the economics and the economic difficulties of recycling. We found 3 top industry officials that we convinced to talk, that came out and talked publicly for the first time. And they told us about what happened when the industry was in its first big crisis, the plastic industry, back in the late 80s and 90s. And you may recall, some of you may recall, that there was a huge crisis about landfills filling up and too much garbage. And that put a lot of pressure on the plastic industry, and states and locals came out with these proposed bans of plastic products. And they tell us about how they averted those bans and preempted those bans by pushing recycling. And then there was one story that was, I thought, sort of hit to the essence of it all and ties back to the last clip. And that was the story about how these logos and numbers got on the plastic packaging in the first place. And we went back and found this recycler who had been in the business a long time and was in very high up in the recycling industry. And he told us the story about how the fact that that symbol and those numbers were actually put on products because the plastic industry wanted them on products. They actually designed it so initially they wanted to help recyclers by characterizing these different types of plastics, helping them sort the different kinds of plastics. But then they insisted on putting those numbers inside the international logo or insignia that represents recycling, that we've come to know as recycling. And even when the recyclers, once that happened, all of a sudden bins started filling up with all this plastic. And this, again, this is back in the 90s, and the recyclers didn't have a way to sell it. And so they went back to the industry and they said, hey, this is a disaster. We can't do this. We've got to change it. And they formed a committee and they came out with a report. And basically the industry said, we'll accept a triangle, but we won't accept a circle or a square or just the number itself. And nothing was done. Nothing was done. And so we've had those recycling symbols on plastic for a very long time since then. And what's the result of that? Well, over the next 2 decades, between 1990 and 2010, plastic production more than doubled. And we got more and more plastic, and with that comes more and more plastic waste. And it would have been a huge crisis at that time, except for China, because China was taking so much of this plastic waste. And at that period in time, China was hitting its manufacturing boom, and they needed the plastic waste so that they could then pick out the parts that they wanted and could turn it into plastic toys and consumer products that they then sell back to us. So China was there, but now that China's not there, we were also interested, well, what's happened to that export market? Now, exports did decrease, but they also started going to other countries, and Indonesia was one of those countries. And so we decided to take a look at what was happening with our waste, plastic waste leaving the US, going to Indonesia. And we focused on one particular company. We'd had some information about the company. We knew it was getting plastic waste. So one more time, just John, the next clip, please.
With the help of an Indonesian journalist, we tried to speak to someone at New Harvest Indo, but we were told there was no one available.
We need to confirm. Kami kesini justru untuk mengkonfirmasi is the data that we have is correct or not.
Can we come in and look?
Kalau kami masuk lihat?
Tidak bisa. Itu udah.
Looks like a lot of shipping containers.
Yeah.
I think we're in the right place.
Yeah.
The customs document we had said the company was getting plastic from the US. With no one from New Harvest Indo willing to speak to us, we still wanted to know what they were doing with all those bales of plastic waste, and whether it was all being recycled. We'd heard about an environmental activist who's been tracking what happens to the plastic coming into Indonesia.
Hi.
I met up with Yuyun Ismawati in a small rural community nearby.
This place, it's huge.
Yeah, it's huge and very wide. You can see it from that corner to the end of that valley over there.
What's it like to look at a field this size and see it covered in plastic trash?
I can show you the pictures.
Oh, really? You took pictures?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Yeah.
We took a seat by the side of the road, and she showed me pictures she'd collected of plastic that locals said had been dumped here.
The sacks are from a plastic company. When I came here in June, I asked them where did they get this from, and then they said it's from Harvest, they call it.
Harvest.
Waste pickers would look for plastics of value, and the rest would be burned.
So this is how it looks like when they burn it.
So it's like a big, sort of a big fire on this pit.
Yeah. People with respiratory problem, they really got affected, and some children got hospitalized.
After the community complained to the government about the burning, the dumping stopped here.
I mean, how big a problem do you think these kinds of dumping grounds are in Indonesia?
How big? They are everywhere around this area. Yeah, the recycling system that we have at the moment is not really recycling, because some part of it being exported all over the world to be recycled.
Yeah.
But you never know whether it's really being recycled overseas or not. There is no proof.
Okay. Yeah, so we tracked down, obviously, that a lot of that waste, what happens is when it gets to these recyclers in some of these other countries, they go through it and they do the same thing that recyclers do here. They take out what's of economic value, what they can make money on, and then in that case, dumping them into communities. And we actually ended up following a worker. We met a worker later that night and followed, he from that company, New Harvest Indo, and we followed him out. He took us out to a new dump site. And sure enough, we looked around the piles out there and found, products that were from the United States. We're pushing the problem around, and partly why we wanted to focus also on Indonesia, just as a real quick, is that the studies suggest that 60% of the plastic in the oceans is coming from Asia, and so the idea of continuing to export our waste problems over there is just contributing to. It's not it's not all our waste going there. They have a tremendous problems with waste management of their own waste, but we're contributing to it. So the one reality is we're pushing the problems around. And the other reality, as I mentioned before, is that production of new plastic is booming. And you can see that along the Gulf Coast. We went down to Texas, and tens of billions of dollars are being spent on building new plastic production facilities, and these are huge, enormous facilities. If you've seen an oil refinery, these are bigger than refineries, basically what's driving that in large part is actually the fracking boom, because as fracking has made natural gas cheaper and more plentiful, which is gas being the primary source for plastic production, the production of new plastic has become cheaper and cheaper. And obviously, as new plastic becomes cheaper, the economics of using recycled plastic becomes even more difficult. And the other piece of this that's interesting to keep in mind is for oil and gas companies, they're under tremendous pressure because of climate change. You know, the idea of oil and gas being used for transportation and energy. You know, obviously we're seeing it today in the election, and that's become a big issue of, you know, what are we going to do about that? And today, plastic is actually the largest growth sector in oil and gas companies. Not oil, not gas, plastic. So, you know, some people argue this is their future. You know, they see that, and so they're continuing to push the development of new markets for new plastic. We actually visited some companies. Chevron Phillips let us in. We asked them about what the solution was. They said we need to do better about recycling. Their plan is they want to be able to make sure that the plastic they produced is 100% recycled. Industry representatives also echoed the sentiment that we need to put more money into advanced recycling and doing a better job of recycling. And you know, the point that, you know, what came, the reality or what came to us, certainly sort of the light bulb went off, is that, you know, when you went back and looked at these documents from the 70s and talked to people that are around early on, the economics of recycling were not there at that time. And the economics haven't changed. They've actually gotten worse because of how cheap it is to make new plastic. So the economics aren't there. And yet industry's answer, which was the answer back in the first crisis back in the 80s and the 90s, let's recycle more, remains the same. We've got to improve recycling. And I'm not saying recycling is bad. Our point is not that recycling is bad. Recycling is certainly good. But the question really is how we've come to obsess about recycling and how the focus of the discussion is centered around recycling. We all remember the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. But recycling has, as one of our person put it, you know, sucked the oxygen out of the air in discussion of reuse, reduce or reuse. And the focus and obsession on recycling is not happenstance. That focus has been, you know, fostered and was created and has been fostered by the very people that want to sell you more plastic. Happy to take some questions. Thank you for the assist, John. I really appreciate it.
Oh, outstanding, Rick. There are a number of questions having to do with maybe the roadmap to recovery, as Heather said. I want to ask one that Pat Fox posed. Where does the CRV money go? Do you know?
So you're talking about in California specific, right?
Well, anywhere.
Yeah, well, I think the California certainly has the program, and it depends on the state. So I mean, it is used, as my understanding, is used to help the recycling industry. So and that's the purpose behind a lot of the bottle bills also, where you're actually collecting. I mean, it's twofold. One is to get people to return things, and I'm not entirely clear on how it works out in California, but the idea is to help support some of the recycling efforts as well. But again, ultimately it's really down to the marketplace that the recycling centers have to make it on. And if they don't have a buyer for their product, right, then they have two choices. I mean, they can either just, you know, generally what's happened is they've had to end up, as I said, landfilling it. And they went from a place where they were selling it to it completely flipping over to where they're having to pay to get rid of it.
Mm. And Fernando, I'll group a couple of questions here because Rob wanted to know about the plastic catcher boat. Tom is asking about a company, Zyleco, and Fernando wants to know something about plastics that are turned into fuel and somebody taking, I don't know, microbes to eat plastic. So the future, we're looking for a happier future.
Right. You want a more positive outlook.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So a couple different, there are a couple different aspects of that. There's one side of it, which is the cleanup effort. I think the catcher mode, the catcher ship, I forget the guy's name offhand right now, who has gotten a lot of publicity around developing that, and it's had some problems, but whatnot. And I'd throw in with that some of these outfits that you can buy a bracelet of plastic, contribute to these groups that go out and clean up the beaches listen, that's fine. I'm not trying to be dismissive of those efforts, but I will say that plays very strongly into the idea that we are responsible for the waste. And that, this goes back to, decades of advertising about, pollution. People are the problem with pollution, right? And so as long as the public is of the mind, I'm going to go out and clean up this beach and whatnot, which is good. I'm not dismissing that. But it is also at the same time helpful to those who produce the product because they're the ones, there are some ideas and ways to make them more responsible and pay more for the waste that is produced. On the other side, there are some different technologies people are looking into to try, this is the microbes and whatnot, and some of it I guess is promising. I'm not well versed enough on which ones are the best. I will just say this, this is a bigger problem than a technical fix. We're looking at, by 2050, some estimates are that there will be more plastic in the ocean by weight than there are fish. And by 2050, at the same time, the estimate is plastic production will have tripled from now.
Wow.
So how do you make those two meet?
What's your next documentary? And then we'll let you get back to work.
Well, thanks. We're actually working on a piece right now that's taking a look at the healthcare system, particularly safety net hospitals that are under tremendous pressure in particular because of the fallout from COVID, financial pressure, and the rise of private equity, which is become more and more involved over the last decade in healthcare and is certainly always interested in purchasing distressed assets. So that's what we're looking at now.
And I got a text about Frontline doing something, the presidential path to victory on tonight, I think. But anyway. Yeah,
so there's actually a very good, I would say, next to watching Plastic Wars, you should. After you watch that, it's definitely worth taking a look at what's called The Choice. It's 2 hours and it's a different approach. It's not sort of just all about policies. It's about sort of the character of both the president and the former vice president. It's interesting.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gay, and thank you very much, Rick, for today's program. It certainly left us with a lot to think about. Our club made a contribution on your behalf and on behalf of all our program speakers to our city forest. It's a nonprofit here in San Jose, which will plant 46 shade trees out in East San Jose to combat what we call heat islands, address climate change, and improve our neighborhoods. Planting these trees makes the place look nicer, provides a habitat for wildlife, and that's our effort to do that by way of thanking you for taking time to talk to us. Would you be available for a few minutes after our formal meeting ends to take on a few more questions for maybe?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to stay. And thank you for everybody for coming, and thank you for listening. Much appreciated.
Excellent. Well, let's see. Next week's speaker is Larry Gersten, PhD. He leads several lives. He's a professor emeritus of political science at San Jose State. He's an author of several books. He's a TV and newspaper commentator. He's a political analyst, better known to us as the guy who will try to make sense of what we will just have gone through by next Wednesday. He'll give us an election recap. So be sure to tune in. And to paraphrase my favorite immigrant governor, hasta la vista, Rotarians, the Zoom meeting stands adjourned, and we look forward to you joining us next week. Welcome also to our new members, Debbie and Sheila. And now we can say goodbye to those of you who have to leave us, but we'll stay on for another 15 minutes or so to allow any additional questions that weren't addressed during our time with Rick Young. So, Gay, do you have any questions that you have for us? For Rick?
There are a number of questions in the chat box, so I'm trying to keep up with some of them. But one of the questions that Arthur Weisbrot posed is, since Asia is really largely responsible for the bigger part of the problem, and they can increase its production and waste as their economies grow, is there anything you think we can do about that?
Yeah, I think the the top priority, and to give them credit, the plastic industry is investing some money in this, and that is to try and make sure that many of these countries, the developing countries, have waste disposal systems that actually take care of, adequately take care of the waste problem. That's the biggest. There's no question. That's the biggest problem, is that so much of so much of the waste just ends up in places, and they don't have good systems in place to collect and deal with that waste. So investments in that, I think, is important. And I also want to recognize, I think that growth in the production of plastic, that demand for that production of plastic is largely coming from developing countries, and that's not a bad thing. We shouldn't be sitting here saying, hey, they don't have the right to have the opportunity to have access to a product and a material that's cheap and effective. So it's really trying to figure out how we deal with the plastic waste, and that just means waste management systems there, but ultimately it also means reducing the amount of plastic that is consumed. And that doesn't mean just plastic. It's just materials generally. We kind of know that.
So since your kids call you obnoxious, so Tracy wants to know, what products would you recommend that food produces in lieu of plastic? And I think there was another question along that same line. As a consumer, we need to make our voices heard that we are not okay with this. Let your manufacturer know. And so, do you want to name any names, or?
I'm going to complicate the issue a little bit more. So there are times, there's another way of looking at this, and we touch on this in the film, but it's not that use of plastic itself is bad. In fact, sometimes on an environmental basis, plastic, which it can be very lightweight and efficient in terms of, as we noted, in terms of preserving food, can actually be a preferable choice environmentally. Transportation, it cuts down on total carbon footprint because it's lighter. So there's a whole science around what's called life cycle analysis, LCA. And the idea being that we should be looking at products in a different way, not whether we shouldn't be standing in the grocery store saying, is this recyclable or not? We should be standing in the grocery store saying, what's the impact on the environment of this product? But that information is not available. Producers don't make that information available. Think when you go to the grocery store and want to know, okay, how much sugar does this product have, right? Or how much cholesterol does it have? And that information affects purchasing, what people purchase. And in the same way, the environmental impact of a product, and its packaging can have an impact in terms of consumer choice. So I would say it's a complicated, there aren't easy answers to that, but the beginning, we need to do to start on that is get information into consumers' hands, because that's when we can begin to make the choices that really matter, not just whether I put it in my bin or not, and then forget about it.
Good point. And Ed Correa, did you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yeah, so I've been thrilled within the last year or so to see different restaurants having compostable trays and packaging and stuff like that. But when I go to the grocery store, I don't see things in compostable packaging or something that degrades rather quickly. Can you enlighten us on progress there?
Yeah, somewhat, perhaps, but I fear that I'm going to be another downer on this, and that is there's some questions around around those compostable claims, similar to the claims around recyclability. Is something compostable? Yeah, in the laboratory, maybe so. But when it actually gets put into some of these commercial compost facilities, is it staying long enough? Is it at temperatures that they need? I don't know enough about it. I don't pretend to. But the expert in Oregon that was taking us around in the grocery store, and we relied on heavily, he's pretty well renowned nationally, David Alloway up in Oregon. And he was raising these concerns about whether or not compostable products. Now, I'm talking about plastic. You may be talking, right, compostable plastic. I just want to be clear. If it's compostable paper or whatever, that could be a completely different. But when it says when it's plastic and it says it's compostable, that's what I'm focused. That's what I'm relating to here. But I probably should go back to what I said before, as I'm no expert on that.
And we have a question, Linda Gold and Sheila McIntyre, who's our new member. So Linda, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. I had a few questions. And Rick, this was a fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions related to political will and consumer advocacy and where we all fit in this. I mean, you did mention how we have, now we can see the amount of sugar and the amount of carbs and blah, blah, blah in whatever we're buying. In the fast food restaurants, they have to post that. Why are most consumers under the illusion that if there's that little triangle, we're, able to recycle this? Why isn't there more accountability, number one, for the countries to which we're shipping our recyclables that are typically our waste, and they're contributing to the contamination? And then where's the political will for better labeling on plastic products so that we know whether this is really what we should be buying or not?
So having to do with the political part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Where's the legislation?
Thank you. That's good.
For this.
Yeah, so there are different pieces of legislation that have been out and are sitting there that did not get a lot of attention over the last 4 years. And some of that legislation, Senator Udall was putting forward legislation that's really quite comprehensive on plastic waste and recycling. And I don't have all the details on it in front of me, but it's worth looking at. Then the question on exports. So, and I should say, there's not a lot of political will at the moment to deal with the issue. That may change, and certainly I think what was been happening in California, and we actually spent a little time on this in the film, but what's happening in California is at the forefront, and so you should take a look at what's the efforts underway there, because as you know, if the California market changes, it drives so much of the national market. As far as the exports, there are also some changes underway in relation to what's called the Basel Convention in terms of controlling the exports of different kinds of waste. And this kind of came about in part because of toxic waste, and has been around and then applied to e-waste and those issues. And they're international conventions. And in fact, they recently have decided to add plastic waste to that. And essentially what that is sort of this notification process. You can't export something to a country unless they know, that you know where it's going, and they know it's going to a place that has been sort of certified as the fact that they're going to handle it properly. That's a very simplistic, description, but the U.S. actually is not acknowledging the Basel Convention as it relates to that right now. So as that comes on board, whether that changes or not, I think that could have some impact on exports. In terms of, I think you asked about also just about the sort of identification on products, and there are different types of ways now that actually even industry is promoting some different kind of recyclability labels. And you may have seen some of these, and frankly, I find it a little bit amusing in the sense that it can be very confusing. Rip off this label and throw it in the garbage, and then rip the packaging around this, the soft wrap around this, and throw that in the garbage. But then you can recycle the inner container, and whether consumers actually are going to go through all of those processes, right? You're kind of like, okay, whatever. And it's kind of disturbing to see. I mean, you see this, and it's all marketing. It's all driven by marketing, where the package, you may have just a basic, plastic bottle, which actually is very, is recyclable. There's a market for it, and should be recycled. But now they start selling them with this, wrapper around it that gives it a different, color and a better marketing pitch. And then it just makes it very difficult, because that actually the wrapper is not recyclable. So what's driving so much of this is the marketing of the brand producers. You'll come up with different recycling labels. I just think that the more that we focus and continue to focus on recycling as the answer, we're going to continue to get more of what we've got. And, you look back, it's, I think I said, I don't know if I did, but I should have, is, less than 10% of all plastic has been recycled. So it's not a very effective way of taking on the problem.
And maybe we'll finish with one last question from our new member, Sheila. But I was just going to say, I think all of us are pretty excited with how you flipped it around. And I know Julie's still on. Those of us with the Cancer Society advocated for labeling on foods. And I mean, it took a huge effort, but that represents real positive flip for things. Okay, Sheila McIntyre, you want to ask your question?
Yes, Rick, I was so kind of along the lines of what Linda was talking about. It's just more legislation and more transparency. And, it really comes down to consumerism, and we are consumers. And so it's like, how does one actually get this out to the consumer? I mean, on a larger level, so people realize what you've just discussed. I guess I'm just thinking, even in terms of whatever legislation you said didn't get a whole lot of attention, but, and again, I know sometimes if you put tax, like if you go back and tax, like the plastic manufacturers, well, many times it's a trickle down effect, and that's as the consumers pay that tax, but Like maybe they go back and that money has to go into engineering ways where they can figure out a purposeful way to reuse that plastic. So I'm just wondering if there's any talk like that. I'm sure there is, but you know, is there a silver lining?
All right, so let's try and end on an upbeat note. I think, first of all, in terms of getting the word out, I will say shamelessly, I hope everybody just sends the documentary around to all your friends.
I just put it up there.
Yeah, right. I think there's no question. I mean, change comes about when consumers demand change. What you were saying about how long and hard a fight it is to get information about what may affect, on your effort there, what you were talking about, Gay. I think we're at the point here. People recognize the plastic pollution problem, right? And that's huge. I mean, that's important, and that's huge. The next step really is recognizing that it's not our fault entirely, that it's not our responsibility necessarily to go out there and clean up the plastic problem. That we have to look at ways to put pressure on the industry. And I think it's going to be hard. And you're right. I mean, taxes end up, you increase the price. But I will say, while the consumer pays that price, the reason that the industry fights against that is because they know that the higher the price, the less the consumer buys. So there is an aspect of that that actually reduces consumption, right? It's not always fair, but it's necessary. But because you've got the whole sort of disparity, socioeconomic disparity, and who pays the price for that, and whether or not that there are a lot of issues with that. But ultimately, if you have a really cheap product, more and more of it's going to be bought. And right now, we've got very cheap plastic. So you've got to look at ways to try to increase that cost, collect that money in a way that can be used effectively, not just toward recycling, as you said, sort of design, and the industry talks about this, and there are some efforts underway and they recognize that they have to design better, but generally what they design better for is design better for recycling. And again, I think we've learned a lesson 40 years in right now that can't be our only answer and focus. So I think it's just a matter of getting behind some of these legislative efforts, I guess, in terms, if consumers are going to get involved, that's generally the place to do it. And also demanding information, because at the end of the day, it's the consumer choice in the store, and that's going to have an impact. And I won't go on any longer, but just to note that COVID's had an interesting impact, right? I mean, we're all sort of getting these packages now delivered to us, and they usually come in plastic in some way. And then you open up a box and it's filled with what? It's filled with plastic, and there's no question. I mean, you go into a hospital and the industry's point is, hey, listen, everything you're relying on here is based on plastic. So it isn't a pro-plastic, anti-plastic thing. It's just who's going to be responsible for actually reducing the waste stream. And I think, Sheila, what you're saying, I mean, you're right that it is ultimately the consumer, either through pressure or through consumer choice.
Well, Rick, listen, we promise not to shoot the messenger, but your message has been a real downer. And I'm hoping that we can figure out ways to cure this problem, because it just seems intractable. But it's like homelessness, it's like the pollution in the air, the fires that we've had, so many problems that are facing our society now. But you're doing some wonderful work in bringing this information to our attention, and I'm hoping that through your work, things can ultimately change. So thank you for sharing your time and your experience and your wisdom with us.
And it's journalism. I mean, thank God there are journalists out like you who are doing this terrific work. And I know.
Well, I just wanted to say that Our executive director says that we're going to include the documentary of today in Friday's bulletin as a link. And also Gay says you can go on to Frontline Plastic Wars and watch it online. So thanks everyone. Thank you for joining us, and hasta la vista, amigos.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.